Troops in Mauritania overthrow the country's first freely elected leader and now have formed a state council to rule the country. A setback for democracy, or setting the right democratic path after a power struggle at the top. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. The leaders of the military coup in Mauritania have promised to hold elections as soon as possible. The military junta deposed the government just over a year after democratic elections, as Beth and Howe reports.
The news of the coup has been greeted with celebrations at home and condemnation from abroad. Early Wednesday morning, Mauritanian President Sidi Weld Sheikh Abdullah dismissed the commander of his presidential guard, General Abdelaziz, and 3 other top military leaders. Within hours, the presidential guard had detained both the president and the prime minister. They took over national broadcasters and declared the formation of an interim ruling council.
The decision by the former President Abdullahi to sack the Army Chief of Staff is null and void.
President Abdullah was elected last March, but the leaders of the coup have accused him of corruption and being too soft on Islamic militants on whom previous regimes had cracked down. The news garnered mixed reactions on the streets of the capital, Nouakchott.
Sidi Weld Sheikh Abdullah is the president. We've elected him. No one but the people should remove him from power.
We on the Mauritanian street oppose any abuse of power by the president, and we support the state council assigned the task of removing him from power.
This is not the first coup Mauritania has seen. The military has been involved in almost every government since the country's independence from France in 1960. Mauritania has been in political crisis since a vote of no confidence in the cabinet in July. And on the 4th of August, 48 MPs walked out of the ruling party, claiming the president did not consult with them enough over new policies. The coup has been condemned internationally by supporters of the fledgling democracy.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms the Mauritanians' military's overthrow of the democratically elected government of Mauritania. We oppose any attempts by military elements to change governments through extra-constitutional means. We call on the military to release the President and the Prime Minister and to restore the legitimate, constitutional, democratically elected government immediately.
The Council promises to relaunch the democratic process and hold free and transparent elections. Watching the most recent coup, outsiders may be tempted to ask, if they don't agree with the next elected president, what is to stop the military from ousting him, just as they have this time and the time before? Beth and Howe for Inside Story.
Well, joining us now are our guests in Cleveland, Ohio, Boubacar Ndaya. He's a professor of political science and Pan-African studies at the College of Worcester. In New York, Mansour Kane, he's president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights in Mauritania. And here in Doha, Mohamed Lamine, he's an Al Jazeera journalist and an expert on Mauritanian affairs. Mr. Ndaya, what's going on here? Why did the general choose to act?
Well, they choose to act because they never thought that the president they essentially picked would do things that they would not agree with. And second, I think they never gotten around the idea that democracy, the one that they were supposed to have ushered in, supposes that the person elected makes decisions and nobody around him is supposed to check those decisions, and that it's the people that checks those decisions in an interval of 5 years in the case of Mauritania. So when President Sidi Sheikh Abdullahi was not playing his part in the post-2005 coup scheme, he was deemed no longer useful and was dismissed, essentially.
But it seems to me that the military never stepped away from the political arena, so surely this was inevitable.
Absolutely. I have, in an article I wrote in 2006, before the transition, predicted that this would be certainly the scenario. The military never left power, essentially. They thought that they could remain in power with a figurehead. And of course, when that figurehead no longer was useful, they removed him. And one must say also that President Sirushan Abdullahi essentially was a little bit naive in believing that he could essentially stop suddenly, as he thought yesterday. He started suddenly doing what he pleases and essentially dismissed those who made him king.
Okay, Mr. Kane, do you agree that there was some sort of justification for this coup because he didn't perform as he was expected to perform?
You talking to me, Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Yeah, the whole question is what you just said about the military is just around the corner. The military never left the power, never left the government. So the president, however he is there, elected or whatever, if he's civilian, he has no free hands to rule. I do not see any cause that legitimate a coup to solve a political problem. There are political problems for sure, I mean, I agree, but political problems has to be solved by political problem, not by military rule.
And the problem here, I mean, General Abdelaziz, who's been behind so many of these coups, this time he's overthrown a democratically elected leader. Surely that's going to pose problems.
Exactly. That's, I mean, that's the main thing. This is the first, democratically transparent elections that we know in the history of Mauritania, and it is ended this way. Is very sad. I would say that this will never end until the Mauritanian people take control of their own, political. Their own destiny, political destiny.
Okay, let's bring in the Mauritanian people there and bringing you, Mr. Lamine. I mean, you understand the workings of Mauritania very well. We've seen celebrations on the street. And just before we went on air, we know that the police have just broken up a march against what's happening. What are people thinking about all this?
Well, it's a sort of mixed reaction out there in Mauritania. Definitely, as our colleagues were saying just a few moments ago, there is a sort of frustration and deception on the street. People were expecting this democratic march to go ahead and to go ahead peacefully. But this is just a simplified reading of the coup or the dramatic twist that happened yesterday in Mauritania. To speak of the former president as just a fairly elected democratic president is to cut a long story short. We always tend to forget that this was a president who was handpicked by the military in the first place. And also, for that matter, we forget that the military was the only force that rid us of the dictatorship of Voltaire, and the scourge of which we had suffered more than 21 years. It is the military who really rid the country of that, oversaw a 2-year-long transition period, and were successful in organizing a democratic elections. This is not to really clear the military, but it's just to show that it is a complicated issue. And if I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this, I would say that the story has been in the gathering long before the military coup. We have seen that the president, once he was elected on a reform ticket, and he really promised a lot to Mauritanian people. Hopes were very high of economic, institutional and social reform. But 1 year and 3 months on from his election, nothing changed, nothing at all. Corruption is still rampant, administration is still dysfunctional, and the corruption figures who really dominated the administration during Taya regime still hold key powers in his regime.
Okay, Mr. Ndiaye, sorry, excuse me, jumping in there. This also reflects an internal conflict that has risen in the country. I mean, how do you manage this desperately poor nation that straddles both the Arab and the African worlds? Is that the issue here as well?
No, that's part of the issue that clearly is always present in Mauritanian politics. But let me go back to the point that Mohamed Lamine made earlier. Now, true, the military got rid the country of Wultai's very authoritarian regime in 2005. Now, they did it for a number of reasons. No reason for us to go into all those reasons. But what they also promised is a democracy, at least a democratization process. Now, Mauritania is a very poor country, and corruption has been there for a long, long time. And clearly, President Sheikh Abdullahi, yes, was handpicked by the military, but clearly he won elections that were accepted by everyone as free and fair. And he was the president of the country in charge of making decisions to resolve some of these issues. 1 year and 3 months will not be enough for anybody to resolve the issues that Mauritania was confronting. And corruption, basically, well, what Sir Mohammed said, Mohamed Amin said, suggests that maybe the military were against corruption and that the president was condoning it. It's much more complex than that. Anybody who knows the country knows that all its institutions are very much dysfunctional and characterized by rampant corruption. But the point is, the man was elected, despite his fault and indecisiveness and all the rest of it, was elected for 5 years. And a military coup put an end to that. And that, I think, should be the focus.
Can I elaborate on this point a bit, please?
Okay, briefly, Mr. Lamine.
Okay, I would rather say that a democracy that does not reflect positively on the life of the people is not a democracy at all. What we have seen is, of course, a peaceful handover of power from the military who plotted the coup against Taya in 2005, a peaceful handover of power to a civilian regime. But where are the effect, positive effect of democracy in terms of turning around the economy, rehabilitating the institutions, changing the life of people, and sort of making a takeoff of the country into democracy? What we have seen is
now that is what we have seen.
Sorry, hold on for a minute.
Not for the military.
Hold on for a minute.
And elections are for 5 years.
Please, hold on for a minute. What I'm saying is that Sidi Mohammed al Sheikh Abdullahi, the deposed president, he has contributed a lot to enforce the status quo. And in order for moving for the country ahead along democracy and progress, what he did, he really contributed to a constitutional, or rather institutional setback in terms of pumping in more tribal leaders, more corrupt figures. And we have not to forget that the army, yes, of course, part of the blame is to be put on the army, because we cannot just kidnap democracy like that and get away with it. That goes without,
let's leave
that goes without saying.
First half on that note and what it means for democracy, because we are going to take a closer look at democracy as well as the turbulent history of Mauritania. So stay with us.